From 2016 to 18, my company, Midland Actors Theatre, was the lead partner in an Erasmus Plus project on Mantle of the Expert. There were partners in Germany, Portugal, Turkey, and the UK. The project began with a training week in Birmingham. Luke Abbott took partners through stages in a drama, beginning simply with some rope, a sheet, and an old key in the middle of it. He suggested this represented a secluded tract of land in the Scottish Highlands, which had been closed to the outside world for many years, and he invited us to add signs for the things that might be found there. In the process of adding these signs, we were creating an imagined world, building images of it in our minds, both individually and collectively. We all had an investment, as we had all contributed to the model. One task we did was to add titles to the images. Partners then added translations in their own languages. One of the project partners was Mittelschule Herrenbach in Augsburg. A teacher from the school, Heike Mengele, here on the right, used a similar starting point in developing a mantle project with a transition class of students who were from refugee or immigrant backgrounds and were learning German as a second language. The frame for the class was as city planners. Teacher narration established that there was a large area of land that had been closed for 100 years but had now been opened for redevelopment. The students had, in this case literally, a blank sheet to plan a new city. They added signs in their own languages. The city they planned was quite futuristic with, for example, heliports. They had to explain to others how it would all work, another language demand. Clearly the project resonated for a group of young people who had in many cases only arrived in Germany quite recently to start life in a strange city and were having to adjust to this new world and culture and a different language. One of them added a sign to the model, Unser Land, our land, implying a sense of collective ownership and also a sense of power in making this assertion in a language that was not their first language. Heike herself observed, the students were really involved and they loved Unser Land more than anything else in the classroom. These projects used elements of what Dorothy Heathcote called the iconic, the symbolic, and the expressive. She drew these terms from the work of Jerome Bruner. She wrote, "It was ages before I met and instantly recognized Bruner's particularization of iconic, get the picture, symbolic, shape it in familiar ways of writing and talking it through, before you embark on the expressive, do it now." Bruner actually talked about the inactive, the iconic and the symbolic, not the expressive. He defined inactive as knowing or learning to do something through action, such as riding a bike. This is not the same as Dorothy's expressive, which is about behaving and thinking in a drama context. She always said that she burrowed into rather than borrowed from other people's ideas. Moreover, Bruner argued for a hierarchy in these modes of learning. In early childhood, he said, the child learns by doing, inactive, but as they grow, they acquire the ability to think in images and finally through symbols, words. So the symbolic is seen as the most abstract and advanced form of learning. But in Heathcote's work, the three modes work together rather than as separate stages in development. Arguably, all three are needed to create the drama world and for learning to take place. Here's an example. In a mantle set in a horse stables, the iconic, for example, large horseshoe shapes, work with the expressive, for example, the teacher leading in an imaginary horse, and the symbolic, for example, a sign on the door, we run a Shire horse establishment.
If we look at signs, here are some signs. Now, they are not symbols. We breed horses, and if they have hooves as big as that, that's the sort of horse we breed.
Right.
And so if you want to buy a horse from us, I always have to worry about getting these hooves in the right way. Anything that fits that is one of our horses. So you see, that's a sign. You can see them on our door. We run a Shire horse breeding establishment.
Right.
We breed the best Shire horses. And you can always tell me, now just bring this one forward. Now I'm signing, and I'll just walk her over. You see, I've got to get her to fit move. I'll just walk her over. Now I'm signing,
Right.
these are signing. And when those are there, we know there's going to be a horse put there. We lay them out whenever we're going to bring a horse in.
Right.
And the children always did it. I mean, this was their pride and joy. From that sign,
There's a horse.
they knew how big. Shire horses are massive to small children, you know. I mean, for me, they have to be like this so they're big enough for the children. You see what I mean? Right, that's one sign.
In an interview in 1997, Heathcote offered a very clear account of the value of the iconic and the symbolic in establishing the world of the drama. As she stated, you've got to have certain ways of all the class agreeing on things. The iconic system of a plan, a scheme, a map, she suggested, makes agreement possible. You can add words such as 18th century villa made of brick with yew trees. These elements create the common knowledge in the drama. She observed, you've got to establish in the mind's eye of the children, the drama eye of the children, what is there that is not negotiable. In a drama about a monastery, for example, there might be a well marked on a ground plan. This becomes a non-negotiable element. To get from the dormitory to the chapel, look, you go past the well. We now agree then. Heathcote observed, so if I'm stopping somebody and saying, where are you going, brother? Could you take this message to the Abbott? They might reply, well, I'm actually not going there, I'm going to the well, and we all know it's a non-negotiable thing. You can see here another example of Heathcote's use of a map, here in a project about a team of foresters. The map was created by the teachers at the start of the project. It was designed to introduce curriculum possibilities as well as some key linguistic terms. There's a notable difference here from the approach we saw Luke Abbott take, where the group was given pretty much a blank slate to invent a whole world. A map like this one becomes a focus for a whole project. It's long enough for the class to get round and work on it, and they can add to it as a record of their collective work and as an image of the drama world they are creating. As the group add to the image, they take ownership over it. It becomes our world, or unser Land. The iconic and the symbolic evoke shared images, both images in the head as well as collective images. In other words, it is both individual, subjective, and intersubjective. In the example of the monastery drama, the action of going to the well may be seen as expressive. The expressive in this sense implies acting or behaving in context. It should be noted, however, that the expressive does not simply mean doing. It is a shift in the head into the now time of drama. Heathcote stated, when you come to the expressive, the time has changed. The time can change without the body changing, though, but then you're expressive. But many people think expressive is when they're all jumping up and down and acting. Heathcote stated that she always knew which mode she was using. For example, I just label it for myself. Remember, Dorothy, this is going to be handled through symbols, the symbol for the object, or through the iconic, and so on. Here's another example of the use of the three elements, this time in a drama about the reconstruction of a library. Heathcote suggested that depending on the group, the drama might start in the expressive, putting up new shelves, the iconic, creating architects' plans, or the symbolic, filling in forms for the books in the library. There are obvious opportunities here for language teaching in, for example, speaking or filling in forms in a concrete dramatic context. But it's more than this. In mantle work, there is always already an emphasis on language learning and development. Heathcote once demonstrated how she might introduce a drama set in a monastery for a class of 7-year-olds. She began with a series of cards with job titles on them such as cellarer, herbalist, almoner, and so on.
These are the things that I've heard people sort of do. But there's people called psalmists who do something, and kitcheners who do something, and herbalists who do something. Now, I don't know quite what they do, but I've been asking about, and somebody sent me these cards, but they didn't put them by who does what, you see. So I don't know which of these cards goes with those cards there. So if you think, pick a card,
This sorting task established some shared understanding as well as collective images of life in the monastery. The next step was that the children chose one of the jobs and sat and imagined themselves doing it. Heathcote observed, and when they thought there was a job they'd like doing in their mind, they went and put their name by it. This was not simply an introduction or initiation into the world of the drama, but into the language of this world. Language defines the context and the frame or expertise. It's introduced not simply because the specialized vocabulary might be useful to the students. It may never be in the real world. After all, they're unlikely to end up in a monastery. But the specialized language becomes the language of this community. It is also a tool of the trade, part of the expertise. In other words, it is part of our world, unser Land. We can see too that the language is tied to images, the map of the monastery, the different places of work such as the kitchen, the tools or objects that are used. There are references to shoes, habits and so on, and to implied actions later performed, such as fetching water from a well. These become the basis of the work. Words, image and action are tied together. Here's an example from Heathcote's book, Drama for Learning. In a drama about a factory, she suggests, a worker may need a lathe for turning wood. It would not help to sign the presence of such a lathe by drawing a flat, two-dimensional picture. Such a drawing would become an embarrassment if it became necessary for the student to demonstrate a work process for the lathe. A more useful indicator would be a safety notice. The words, "This wood lathe must have safety guard fitted during operation," accompanied by a drawing of the right-wrong position and the patent number. The iconic and the symbolic lead into a shift in language and behavior, the expressive, an initiation into a world. The icon, the symbol, appropriate to context, support the image in the head, here the imagined lathe, and so also support the expressive, using it. In this way, Bruner's hierarchy of learning is replaced with a symbiosis. The learning is embodied. The drama links images in the head, words and action. It combines visual thinking, symbolic thinking and embodied learning. All three modes, arguably, are required for the learning to take place and for it to pass into what Heathcote termed deep memory. She stated, "Dimension work also puts things into deep memory much more quickly, because it has an impact, so you can get it back again. It doesn't just go past into, oh well, I'll retain it till I don't want it anymore. It begins to be a part of, I need it for other things I do." And of course, deep memory is constantly refurbishing what you're doing now. Your deep memory is what you're drawing on all the time.